Hey everyone, we're back, and I know it's been a long time since I've done a video log, and I apologize for that. Just had a lot of stuff going on, traveling all over the place, helping out with shows and that sort of thing, and so it has been a long time coming. Nothing super sciencey for you guys today. I actually have kind of more of a philosophical message today. I want to talk about failure and success, and why the two are so interconnected. And what do I mean by that? Well, I was talking with somebody the other day, and I told them about how we were talking about, you know, my goals and what I had done, and how I had found some success in various things. And for me, I always found that it was about talking about my goals, writing them down on paper. I said every goal I'd ever written down on paper, I had accomplished. And especially like those that I had kind of announced, you know, that I was going after my PhD or my undergrad or my pro card in natural bodybuilding, etc., etc. I'd always accomplished those goals because, you know, writing it down and having to acknowledge it. Emmett Smith said that a dream is just a dream until you write it down. Then it becomes a goal. I firmly believe that. I think when you have to acknowledge it like that and put it in your face, I think it makes a huge difference. And the person I was talking to said, yeah, that makes sense, but that scares the crap out of me. I kind of said, well, why? I said, well, if I don't get it, then I failed. And that failure is hard to deal with. And that's true. Failure is very, very hard to deal with. But I think that's because in our society currently, people are paralyzed by fear of failure. And I think it's kind of a mirage the way they look at things. They look at failure as kind of a destination, that once you enter the land of failure, there is no coming back from that. And the reality is that failure is not a destination. It's just a detour on the way to success. You know, failure is really only short term unless you quit. I mean, if you keep going and keep going, you know, your goals aren't a question of really if necessarily, but when. I mean, if you just are never going to quit, yes, shameless plug. If you never quit, there's really no failure. There's just setbacks. You know, if you keep going after it. Show me somebody who really worked hard at something for 10 years and wasn't better off because of it, or wasn't way better at it. So it's not a destination, it's just a detour, okay? People have seen, you know, there's like a popular image out there on Instagram where it's a picture and people will say what people think success is, and it has just kind of like a linear line going up and says what success really is. It's like, you know, this. And that's really very true. I mean, you're not looking for a linear progression, but you're looking to move forward. I like the term fail forward. You know, use what you learn from failure in something as a learning experience to keep driving you forward. I think a lot of people, I think in particularly in this day and age, I think a lot of kids, and even my generation, very sheltered. Parents don't want their kids to fail. They shelter them from kind of any kind of failure. Not all parents, but a lot of them. And I can, as a new parent, I can understand that. It would be crushing to see Robert fail at something. But at the same time, I recognize that failure could also be a tool for him and teach him how to keep driving forward. Because let's face it, in this life, not everything is going to work out the way you want. I think it was Bruce Lee that said, do not pray for an easy life. Pray for the strength to endure a hard life. And one of the things I always tell people is that success, people have this kind of idea about success that's like, Will Smith said this, people view it as kind of this esoteric thing that's only like bestowed upon certain people. That's just That's nonsense. Thomas J. Stanley did, for example, an analysis. I believe he was a professor at some university. Did an analysis of the commonalities of millionaires in America. And what he found, and obviously we're using money in this way as kind of a monitor, a marker of success. And not everybody considers money success, and I don't necessarily consider money success. But it's interesting the commonalities you find in terms of people who have accumulated a significant amount of wealth. And what he found was that 80% of millionaires in the United States were first generation. They didn't inherit it. They're first generation, self-made, and they lived in kind of a middle class house and drove a used car. That was the majority of them. And but one of the other commonalities he found was they tended to have a lot of integrity and work very, very hard. I'm not talking about your corporate CEOs, but a lot of millionaires in this country are, they start a business, they grow it from the ground up, that sort of thing, and they just do backbreaking work, and so people kind of have this idea that when we think of success or we think of fame or we think of wealth, that sort of thing, I think Hollywood has skewed our perception of what that is. We look on TV and we think millionaires are the Real Housewives or the Kardashians or that sort of thing. And in reality, I wouldn't even consider those people really successful. Well, not all of them. Because I think success, it's like, for those of you who've seen Jerry Maguire, when Rod Tidwell is talking to Jerry Maguire on the phone, he said he wants the qualm. The entire package. Not just money, but community, all that sort of thing. And that is like kind of the success, the qualm, the entire package, right? So some people may have money, but they're lacking in other areas, and some people may have community, but they're lacking in other areas themselves. So talking about success is kind of a holistic thing. I think that's important to keep in mind. But what I'm trying to get across is that success in most cases, isn't some random thing that just kind of falls into place. And it's not a luck thing. It's not a short-term thing. It's a battle of attrition. Most people who are successful in whatever they do, they're not that much smarter than everybody else. They're not that much more talented. Sure, some of them are smarter, more talented. But for the most part, they just kept going when everybody else said, screw this, I don't need this aggravation, and went home. So I'm going to give you guys a few examples. And I'm not going to give you examples of famous people because I don't think that really resonates as much. Maybe it does, but you can find numerous examples of failure with famous people. Look at Michael Jordan, who got cut from his 9th grade basketball team, and it drove him to become the greatest basketball player of all time. Don't talk to me about Kobe or LeBron or anybody else. Michael Jordan is the greatest basketball player of all time. That's my opinion. You can argue with me, but you're wrong. So I'll give you a story about my parents. My grandparents owned a carpet store in Evansville, Indiana, called Stevens Floor Coverings. It was like a small, I believe it was a franchise. And my grandfather, when he was ready to retire, kind of turned it over to my dad and my mom. And they'd already been working there. My dad had already been working there for years. And Dad busted his back working at that store. He didn't know anything about carpet when he started, and by the end he was a carpet expert, But by the time I was, and they did relatively well, but by the time I was, and Mom kept the books for the store, but by the time I think it was around 10 or 11, they had just been basically, the bigger companies had moved into town, the big chains, and they couldn't compete pricing-wise. And so I still remember my dad, I was outside playing baseball in the front yard, just throwing it around. And I still remember Dad coming out And it must have been one of the hardest things he's ever had to do. And he said, "Son, I want to talk to you. We're having to close down the store. You know, we're going to have to sell some things. We had a ski boat at the time. We loved that boat. Me and my brother, we loved it. We have to sell the ski boat. You know, we're not going to be able to take a lot of trips. We're not going to be able to do a lot of things. We're going to be okay. We're going to be able to keep the house." And I know they closed the store and didn't owe anybody a dime, period. They paid off everybody they owed. Didn't file bankruptcy, you know, in an attempt to save themselves some money. They paid off everybody they owed down to the last dime. And I'll always remember that. But so my dad took a job, an entry-level job, as the lowest paid salesman in the U.S. Tape and Label Company, which was owned by my great Uncle Bill, who some of you may recall from other video logs. Uncle Bill paid for a large portion of my college. So Dad he basically gave that job to Dad as a favor to help Dad out. And it was kind of a short-term thing, and they would see how he did. Dad didn't know anything about pressure-sensitive labels. And he started off at the entry-level position. This was 1992 or 93, I think. And 20 years later, I remember that Dad, the first 10 years of that job, he was traveling 4 or 5 days a week, driving on the road, staying in the crappiest motels he could find, doing cold calls on anybody that would listen to try and sell them labels. I mean, he worked his butt off. And now he is by far, the highest selling person in the company, by far. So that's awesome. He just actually finished a big deal and got a big bonus from his company. But 20 years ago, he was sitting in that detour of failure. Their store had failed. But my dad said that's not the destination. We're going to pick ourselves up. We're going to work hard. And they never blamed anybody. I never heard them blame the economy or blame the other stores who came in or anything like that. They never asked for help from anybody. They never said, "Oh, somebody, this is the government's fault," or whatever. I never heard that. Never heard them blame anybody. They said, "We're just down on our luck, and we're going to keep fighting, and we're going to get up." My mom, very intelligent. She took a job as a waitress, far below what her intelligence and value was, but that was the only job she could get at the time. She took a job as a waitress, getting paid virtually nothing. And they worked and worked and worked, and by the time I was in middle school, she had gotten a job as an assistant for one of the top-selling realtors in Evansville, Indiana, Marilyn Schneider. And I mean, she might as well have been a realtor herself. I mean, Marilyn was all over the place. She was a great realtor, taught my mom a ton. And unfortunately, when I was in my first year of college, Marilyn got very sick with pancreatic cancer. And she passed very shortly after. And so my mom basically didn't have a job. Now, she had done such an awesome job for Marilyn that the people who owned the realty company said, if you want a spot, we will give you a spot as a realtor. That was very scary to Mom because while realty can be quite lucrative, you basically sink or swim. It's all commission. If you don't sell houses, you don't eat. And my mom considered taking a steady pay job. Instead of doing that, she was worried about the time commitment, and we all told her, my brother, my dad, and I, we said, we trust you. You're smart. You're a hard worker. We know that, maybe the first few months will be rough, but once you get going, we know you'll be good at it. And lo and behold, now she sells millions of dollars of real estate a year. And so now if you look at my parents and what they've done with their careers, you say, wow, they're very successful. They're at the top of their companies and what they've done. And but you don't see where they came from, and you don't see what failure taught them and what it taught me. So seeing this progressed throughout the years, that was something that was very helpful for me to understand that failure was not an endpoint, not a destination, just a detour. So I'll give you an example about me in middle school, and this is small stuff, right? But I believe that these small lessons teach you something. When I was in middle school, I really wanted to make the basketball team. Really, I loved basketball. Even though I was 5'10" and couldn't jump. At the time, I'm 5'10" now. I was about, I don't know. I was not tall. I was about average height. And I'm not coordinated, had very, very little talent for it. And so 6th grade, tried out for the basketball team. Got cut, first cut, didn't make the cut. Not even a second look. And I went to they had off-season conditioning, weight training, all that stuff that was voluntary. A lot of the players themselves didn't even go to. I went to every single one, and got cut. And that's okay. Came back 7th grade, tried it again, got cut. So in 8th grade, I said, "This is the year. I am making it this year." In 7th grade, I got cut first round of cuts too. I practiced by myself at home every day, and made it to the first round of cuts. That was the first time I'd ever made it. I was like, "Oh man!" They put the names of the people that have made it through the cuts on the wall outside the principal's office. So made it through the first round of cuts. My name was up there. Made it through the second round of cuts. Name was up there. And it came to the last round of cuts. And I came in, I worked my tail off. And I remember being so nervous that day. Came in, looked at the principal's office, and my name wasn't on the list. And I was crushed. But the coach actually found me in the hall and said, "Come talk to me after school. I want to talk to you about something." And so I went and talked to him after school, and he said, "Look, I didn't have a spot for you. You're a hard worker. There are people who are better than you." And it was tough to hear, but okay. He said, "I really want you to come be a manager. I really want you to come be an equipment manager and just be around the team." He's like, you're a good influence. You're a hard worker. I just want you to be around the team." And I thought, oh boy, great, equipment manager. Yeah, everybody wants to be an equipment manager. But okay, so I did it. And when I wasn't managing the equipment, when they were practicing, I would practice by myself. And then about halfway through the season, when I wasn't managing the equipment, I said, "Coach, when I'm not managing the equipment, do you mind if I practice with the team? I just want to practice with the team." He said, "Yeah, sure, of course." And about 3/4 of the way through the season, he came up to me and said, "I got something for you." I was like, "What's that?" And he handed me a jersey. He's like, "Look, I want you to be part of the team." He's like, "We'll make an extra spot for you." Oh my God, wow. I'm on the basketball team. I might have not done it traditional way, but I was on it. And he said, "Get ready. Well, we're going to use you." And I remember that. And a couple games went by, didn't use me. And it got down to one of the last games of the season. And at this point, I was pretty sure I was never going to get into a game. And I also remember at practice when we were running wind sprints, he would always yell, before he put me on the team, "Why is my equipment manager outrunning everybody else?" So we got down to one of the last games of the season, and he goes, it's about halfway through the game, and he says, "All right, Lane, here you go. Get in there." And, was only in for 5 minutes, but took two shots, made them both, scored 4 points, and grabbed a couple rebounds. And man, I was beaming the whole night. It was like I'd won the lottery. And after the game, I don't recall what our record was, but I think we're about like 500. I think we're like 50-50. The coach said, he's like, "You guys got a lot of talent." He said, "If you all played as hard and practiced as hard as Lane did, we wouldn't lose any games." Something to that effect. And that really stuck with me. I really remembered that. And fast forward to graduate school, a lot of people don't know this about me. I didn't have any data for graduate school for about the first 3 years. The analysis for muscle protein synthesis is extremely complex. It takes a long time, usually from collecting the tissue to actually getting the analysis done and actually having data is at least a week or two. And that's after you've homogenized all the tissue and everything, which takes, if you've got 80 to 100 samples, that's going to take you about a week by itself. And we couldn't get the analysis to work. Over and over and over and over and over again we failed. Dozens, if not hundreds of times. Couldn't get it to work. I got so despondent, I stopped coming into lab. And because I was so petrified of failing again. I couldn't take it. It was breaking me. And my advisor called me into his office, Dr. Lehman. And I came in, he said, close the door behind you. And he said, if you want to study muscle protein metabolism, you are at the best university to do it, or one of the best. He said, there are a lot of people who would give anything to have your spot. He said, I don't expect perfection, but I expect effort. And failure is part of this process. Everyone fails. You need to pull yourself up and go to work. Because I wasn't coming to the lab, 3 or 4 times, except for 3 or 4 times a week. Not as much as I should be. And it just clicked right there. I looked at him and I said, you're right, it's my fault, and I'm going to fix it. And I established the mindset that even though I was very, 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 very upset, in a way humiliated, and just lacked motivation, I said, this is my one shot to do this right. And maybe I fail. Maybe I never get that PhD. But I'm going to do, and it seems so far away. The mountain to climb is enormous. I don't have any data. I'm 3 years in. I'm going to do every single thing I can do today, right now. I'm going to do it tomorrow. And then I'm going to do it the next day. And I'm going to do that every single day. I don't care if it means coming into the lab at 2 a.m. in the morning. I'm going to do it every single day. And if I fail then, at least I failed knowing I gave it everything I had. And lo and behold, right when I established that mindset, it seemed like things started falling into place. We were able to get the analysis to start working. We figured out what the problem was, and then we were able to start really churning out data once we got the analysis working. And that was a turning point for me. It was Dr. Lehman calling me into his office, and he didn't yell at me, didn't throw a fit, but he made it very clear what he expected, and told me that failure was part of this process, and everybody fails. And I remember talking with Tracy Anthony the day I graduated. She's a former PhD student of Dr. Lehman's and now a professor at Rutgers. At the time, she was at IUPUI, which was not too far from where we were, and she actually helped me out a lot. She taught me Western blotting. And so I called her the day I graduated to thank her for her help. And I said, Tracy, I got to tell you that it's kind of embarrassing, but I wanted to quit my PhD at one point. And she just laughed in the phone. She says, oh, honey, everybody wants to quit at a certain point. Come to find out, every PhD student I've ever talked to said, yep, that's about right. At a certain point, you want to quit. And it's almost like a rite of passage. But you stay on that grind. You don't let where you are now make you feel like that's where you're going to be forever. You got to keep beating down the door. People think that any kind of failure is just the end, and it's not. Like I said, it's just a detour on the way to success. True failure is never even attempting success. I know people who are so paralyzed by fear, they don't even want to acknowledge goals. If I put it down, then if I miss, it's failure. Well, who cares? my dad always used to, I was not good with girls growing up in high school. And I would always be afraid to ask a girl out. I never understood Dad's logic behind this. And Dad would always say, why don't you just ask her if I had a crush on a girl? Oh man, I'm too scared. Dad said, well, let me ask you this. Are you dating her now? I said, no. Okay, if you ask her and she says yes, will you be dating her? Yeah. If you ask her and she says no, will you be dating her? No. He said, so what's the difference between asking her and her saying no and not asking her? Because in both scenarios, you're not dating her. But there's only one way you can be dating her. And the difference is ego, right? Like if we fail, we feel like that's it. Like that's it. Like it would be too hard on our ego, our fragile ego. And I think, goals are like that pretty girl in high school. If you want to, if you don't attempt your goal, your dream, whatever it is, are you going to do it? And no, it's not just going to fall from the sky. But the only way is to attempt it. So my advice to you is do not fear failure. Fear mediocrity. I once heard a quote that said, and I can't remember who said it, but the enemy of the best is not the worst. The enemy of the best is okay, just fine, average. Because typically, if you're in the worst scenario, you're not comfortable with that, and you will push to get out of it. Not everyone, but a lot of people. But average is comfortable enough. Mediocrity is comfortable enough to stay there. As my good friend Ryan Doris would say, have the courage to exit homeostasis. If you really want something, the only thing stopping you is you. Failure is not a destination. It's just a detour on your road to success. Hope this video is helpful for you guys, and I appreciate your support. If you liked it, please click like and subscribe, and I will catch you guys next time. Thank you. Never quit.